It was the dawn of the third age of podcasting, 30 years after the series had launched.
The Babylon Podcast was a dream given form. Its goal, to discuss the place where humans and aliens could work out their differences peacefully.
It's a port of call, home away from home for established fans, newbies, John, Blaine, and guests.
Humans and aliens wrapped in 2,500,000 tons of spinning metal, all alone in the night.
It can be a dangerous place.
Wait, what?
But it's our last, best hope for peace.
This is the story of the last of the Babylon stations.
The year is 2024.
The name of the podcast is
Babylon 5, 30 years later. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Babylon 5, 30 years later, the podcast where typically we look at TV episodes and made-for-TV or DVD movies related to Babylon 5 30 years after the broadcast date. That we as myself and John Wilson. How you doing, John?
I am doing all right. It's been an interesting week. Good things are happening, and I feel like running 5 miles up a no-gravity tube. So you want to come with me on that? Because I'm going to abduct you and force you to, whether you want to or not.
Okay.
That's just how we are.
I suppose I can pass the time by singing. Just, no, I'm not a good singer.
Neither is Garibaldi, evidently.
Yeah. Or at least he's playing it up to be irritating. Yes, when I said we typically look at TV and movies 30 years after the fact, well, we can't do that typically at that moment because the next broadcast episode will come out on October 11th, following the last one on May 24th. So we are covering the ancillary material again. This time, John and I are covering the final 3 issues of the original comics series. So these are issues 9, 10, and 11, where one story is a 2-parter that spans issues 9 and 10, and then we have a one-shot with 11 that wraps it up and establishes a piece of canon we've mentioned before.
Yes, the issue 11 does establish an interesting piece of canon, which has been kind of the thing with the comic book series, is giving us interesting tidbits about the lore of the show that we haven't gotten on the show yet. And I know that you've been kind of surprised that some things have come out as early as they did in the comics. And so it's with that kind of expectation that we go into issues 9 and 10 and don't get. Well, I'm spoiling my review on issues 9 and 10.
Yeah, I'm going to spoil mine a little bit too. When we talked about issues 5 through 8, the negative critique I kept bringing up over and over and over was how the likeness of Garibaldi wasn't particularly good. One of the reasons I kept bringing that up over and over is there wasn't a lot of other negative criticism to bring out. I'm just going to say right here and now, I don't expect to bring up the poor likenesses as much, but they are worse in issues 9 and 10. I just think there's going to be other things to bring up as well. So we're not going to talk about it as much, but that doesn't mean this is worse. And I almost feel like I need to apologize to the artist of 5 through 8 for how often I brought that up.
Well, they're not listening probably, so it's okay. But yeah, let's get into this comic if you want to. All 3 of these came out before the series resumed. Several month gap. And so 5 and maybe 6 came out before we went to a broadcast break. 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 of a monthly comic book came out during this break of episodes. I think 11 was a good few weeks before the show came back. But we're going to look at number...
Yeah, actually about 1 week.
1 week? Okay.
October 5th versus October 11th.
That's right. I read it early for other reasons.
Yes.
All right. So the story in issues 9 and 10 is called Laser Mirror Star Web, which is an invented Babylon 5 version of Rock, Paper, Scissors. They're cover dated October and November of 95. They came out August 10th and September 7th, respectively. So we're moving toward October. David Gerald is the writer for both issues. Rebecca Guay did the pencils, Rick Bryant on inks, Robbie Bush did the colors, Tracy Hampton Munsey did the letters, Laura Hitchcock editor, and the cover of the first issue, issue 9, is Steve Pugh of Foundation. because it is a generated image similar to the style of the show. And I'm just flipping over to where my copy of 9 is so I can describe it. It's pretty nondescript. You see the Babylon station, you see the planet behind them. There's some sort of ship in the foreground that appears to have an explosion coming out of it, but the explosion is almost off panel. So it's not like, it's hard to tell if that's the drama or if that's just light reflecting. But as we find out in the story, there actually is an explosion on this ship. So anyways, any thoughts on the cover before we dive into the story?
No, it's a nice cover. That little explosion in the corner, the fact that it's in the corner is a little surprising, since that's the part that's a little dynamic. The rest of it, as you said, it's by Foundation Imaging and Steve Pugh. So these are the people who worked on the TV series doing the special effects.
So it looks like Babylon 5.
Yeah, it's a perfect fit for the TV series, but without that explosion, it's one of those establishing shot kind of frames where this isn't the part that gets you excited. This lets you know where we are at the moment. So having the dynamic thing partially cut off in the bottom left and partially covered by the barcode just strikes me as an odd choice, because that's the part that says, hey, there's action in here, buy this book.
Right. So there is an editor's note on the opening page of the story that the events of this story take place between the geometry of shadows and a distant star. In other words, early spring 2259. And those are episodes 3 and 4 of the season. Now, if I remember right, because I have a bad head for detail sometimes, episode 3 kind of wrapped up our introduction to the new season and teased the shadows with actually, what are the highlights of 3?
So 3 was the one that Van Allen Plexico joined us for.
Right.
And that was the one where you don't see a lot of the tease of the shadows directly. It was more people that we do not yet realize are their agents. Oh,
that was the one where they had the leader died, right?
I think you, again, might be thinking of 9, The Coming of Shadows.
Oh, I get those two shadows as confused.
Yeah, so Geometry of Shadows, the way it's summarized on Wikipedia, is Londo continues to seek prestige and power back home. A group of techno-mages visit the station, and Ivanova is forced to settle a dangerous dispute among the Drazi people.
The Drazi.
So this was the green versus purple.
That's right, right.
And that the techno-mages. I think most of what you were describing was episode 9, where the Centauri Emperor Turhan comes to the station for a visit and, ends up dying. And
okay, yeah, that's exactly what I had in my head, yeah. Okay, so we're just after that. And in this issue, Ambassador G'Kar, just out of nowhere, demands to leave the station immediately. But Ivanova is in the CNC she's overseeing a docking Narn ship. So there's traffic in the way. You're trying to pull out into the street and there's cars. So you can't. So they refuse G'Kar's request, but he decides he's going to go anyway. Garibaldi tries to stop him, so G'Kar knocks him out and kidnaps him rather than let him interfere. But then Garibaldi wakes up and stuff happens. Sheridan pursues them as they leave in the Narn ship. Sheridan pursues in his own ship, accompanied by somebody who just kind of shows up out of nowhere as Sheridan is running towards the ship. This other Narn named Grigil. He says that he is G'Kar's Inidarka. We don't know what an Inidarka is. Sheridan doesn't know what an Inidarka is. And we don't really know what an Inidarka is until the 5th page from the end of the story. But he is G'Kar's Inidarka. So he goes with Sheridan because Sheridan can't put him off. Back with G'Kar, Garibaldi confines him to an energy web, which, so G'Kar can't go anywhere. He's trying to get away and he can't do anything. And Garibaldi also annoys G'Kar by singing various songs until G'Kar agrees to cooperate. Garibaldi and G'Kar are forced to work together in a weightless environment. Garibaldi realizes they haven't actually gone anywhere. They're in the tube of the core of Babylon 5. So while Sheridan and Grigil are catching up with what turns out to be G'Kar's empty ship, G'Kar and Garibaldi are still back on the station. They're in the core tube, and it's not a safe place to be because there's this gigantic, monstrous cleaning machine. And you know that part in Galaxy Quest where they're like, what purpose does this room serve? Why is it here except to cause us problems trying to get from one place to another? That's this. why is there a giant cleaning death robot going down this? Anyways, so it starts its cleaning process because it detects the foreign substances, i.e. G'Kar and Garibaldi, and it starts moving down the length of the tube. And so they have to get away from it, and they have to go the 5-mile length of the tube. So speaking of dangerous places, Sheridan and Griegel, they're, docked and trying to work with G'Kar's vessel and trying to get his attention. He's not there. And they barely escape G'Kar's vessel before it self-destructs. There's an explosive on board. So that's issue 9. We end with the ship that Sheridan's ship is connected to exploding. So where are you on this issue?
My mother told me if I can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. So I'm tempted to skip to 10. But no, it's not that bad. When you bring in David Gerrold, you're going to be bringing in the funny. Yes,
there are some great lines, and it's a romp.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's my issue, is that it's a tonal shift that doesn't feel like Babylon 5 to me.
Mm-hmm.
There's humor in it, but not
Babylon 5
to the level of farce that this goes to.
Right.
The humor on Babylon 5, I feel, is a lot more natural, and this feels a little forced. And while Rebecca Guay... Okay, I talked about the likeness rights, and I think that's the main obstacle here. If she were writing a comedic series, or she were drawing a comedic series where our primary association was not with actual human beings, I wouldn't have an issue with this art. So in terms of her panel layout and how she goes, she is a good storyteller. She's off-model enough that, to me, that works if it's a silly comedy, more than if it was a serious drama. But again, you need that. I think if you're doing a licensed product, you want to have something much more consistently on model, preferably with the likeness rights, to keep it in line with the reader expectations.
Weirdly enough, the faces didn't bother me so much in this. The likenesses being off didn't bother me because the faces themselves seemed reasonably well drawn and they conveyed emotions and stuff. I thought the Narns were pretty well done. I thought she had their look pretty great, or at least they make you think of Narns, even if maybe they're not exactly on model with Narns. But the art and the storytelling in this didn't bother me at all. As far as the visual storytelling, it was like you said, the tonal shift, the complete shift away from everything that this comic series has been doing so far into an area that not only doesn't feel like an episode, it also doesn't do the kinds of things that episodes do as far as moving story forward, giving us information. The issues we've done so far, 1 through 8, have felt like, wow, I needed to have read that. That was really cool. And this is less of that, but it's kind of a little romp. It's kind of an adventure, but yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, the tone of this is less consistent with Babylon 5 than it is with Gilligan's Island. Just...
Yeah.
Even, like I said, as a visual storyteller, she's good, but like the way she poses her characters and they're almost a little bit rubbery.
Mm-hmm.
They're very exaggerated in a lot of things.
That was the thought the first time I read this. It felt like the art from the Boba Fett Han Solo short from the Star Wars Holiday Special.
Okay.
Have you seen that enough times to have a visual for it?
I have not endured that one time yet.
Okay.
Although it is on my to-do list.
Well, there's an animated short in it that is sort of considered the highlight and the only part of it worth watching. So if you can find that somewhere, it kind of feels like that. And there's a sort of rubberiness to the animation in that even though there's static images, it still kind of comes across. But some of the specifics, there's the rock, paper, scissors, which here is laser mirror star web. But the crazy thing is that every single time Garibaldi and G'Kar play laser mirror star web, G'Kar does some other random finger gesture and claims that it's something that is neither a laser nor a mirror nor a star web, but trumps all of them. That it's a plasma field or a black hole or whatever. And so he claims to win the Rochambeau game, and Garibaldi just goes along with it. Like if you were doing rock, paper, scissors, and you made an explosion and said, yeah, I'm an atomic bomb, so I win. That's not how the game works.
No, it's not. And that's part of it is, honestly, I think that's part of the issue, because Garibaldi and G'Kar are largely adversarial in this, which is not the relationship that I know them from. It feels almost like David Gerrold still wrote it with the status quo from when he wrote an episode early in season 1. And it feels almost like he hasn't kept up with the series and realized things have changed.
Okay, because I was reading it through sort of the filter of how they've softened a bit. And even though G'Kar is doing things that Garibaldi doesn't like right now, I don't see so much as adversarial as Garibaldi just trying to get the day back under control and figure out what G'Kar is doing and, trying to make things stop. I didn't see it so much as antagonistic as, why are you doing this? What's going on here?
It could be. I just saw with the kidnapping and the Star Web and all this, it didn't feel like they had the same level of mutual respect that they now have on screen.
Yeah.
Now, some of that I have to, it might be me mixing it in because of when this was published. That's post Coming of Shadows, where the war between the Centauri and the Narn has started in full. And Garibaldi and a lot of people on the ship want to take sides with the Narns, but politically cannot do that explicitly.
And that is a weird tone glitch, which you can't really control because he wrote this before the show did those things. But we're in a part of the show's storytelling where the Narns are they're a very sympathetic people because they have a plight. There are things going bad with them. And this just kind of sends them on a little romp through the park. And it just kind of feels weird for where G'Kar and the Narns are right now. Garibaldi does make a Superman reference, though, which made me smile. Right at the beginning, right before they go after G'Kar, Ivana says, you're launching into a collision, abort your approach. And Garibaldi starts to head out. He says, this looks like a job for Superman. Unfortunately, he's not here, so I'll have to do it myself. And I just love that in the 24th century, they're still saying this looks like a job for Superman.
I like that. And I think, actually, that is a clear sign of how well Gerald knows Straczynski as well. Because the idea of Superman, that character, has resonated with Straczynski through his entire life.
Mm-hmm.
If you've read his autobiography, there is no time when Straczynski is awake where he doesn't have that S shield on him somewhere. Whether it's a keychain or a t-shirt under the professional attire or something. He has a Superman shrine in his home.
Mm.
If you have not read Becoming Superman, I would suggest that you do it. And I don't know if, John, do you have a copy of that?
I have it on Audible.
Okay, which I believe was actually read by Peter Jurasik. But yeah, you know what? Perhaps we should consider doing that before we wrap up the podcast.
As one of our other JMS projects.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, because we have one that is currently undefined between Babylon 5 and Crusade.
There we go.
So, okay. I'm going to pause the recording and slip that right in here. Okay. So we can, right now we'll consider doing that then. But yeah, Superman is a huge part of Straczynski's past.
Okay.
And who he is. And he was very excited to write the character. And I think when he wrote the regular Superman book for about 13 issues before the New 52, I think
3.
that what Superman...
He had to abort and he was taken over by another writer.
That's true. He outlined all 13 and scripted 3, and then had to take a step back because of pressures and the fear that he was going blind at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that started with a promotional idea where, people could write in and why Superman should visit their town, and that was going to be incorporated into the story because Superman was walking the width of America. Because DC said, hey, we want the status quo very much like we had in the 30s. And he's going, we just had a war with a bunch of Kryptonians on the North Pole.
Mm.
I had this war against Zod. How do we get there? And he wanted to bridge the gaps. And then people were not huge fans of that run for reasons. And I think some of it is what Superman meant to him wasn't quite what it meant to a lot of the readers.
Right.
And then they cleared the decks with the New 52, and they were able to just restart with a Superman that was the tone that DC was looking for from JMS after his run. But because it was a clean slate for continuity, they didn't have to justify getting there, and they could have just started. So I suspect Straczynski would have been a more popular Superman writer had he been offered one of the New 52 books.
Right.
Instead, it could start with that clean slate and didn't have to get from A to B. Because it was the connective tissue he was writing that people were judging him by, and not where he would have gone in the long term.
Okay.
But that's a huge tangent from these particular Babylon 5 comics not written by Straczynski.
So the one other thing I wanted to comment on in this issue is the Griegel-Sheridan dynamic, because I don't think for one half moment that Sheridan would let Griegel weasel his way into the position he's in. Sheridan's going to go do something. He's going to go get something done. Somebody says, can I tag along? And Sheridan's going to be like, no, you can't. Stop. He's not going to just let this guy come along for no reason. I mean, he could be anyone. And he turns out to be a huge, major security risk, dangerous person to have alongside. And then Griegel's like saying all these things about, I'm super important or whatever. And Sheridan's like, how so? And he's like, well, I'm not going to tell you unless you pay me. And so they have to like negotiate and bargain out. It's a delaying tactic, so we don't find out everything at the beginning of the story, because that's part of the storytelling, is they trickle out what this guy actually is. But I don't see this happening at all with Sheridan, even a little bit.
No, I see Sheridan, instead of saying, I don't have time to argue, so come along, I see Sheridan saying, I don't have time to argue, slamming the hatch in his face and leaving without him.
Right.
And then having that exposition where, Griegel goes to Ivanova to say, you have to get in touch with Sheridan, you have to get me there. And so the reader still knows that Ivanova can fill in Sheridan on the way, but have Sheridan as the solo story, and Griegel is still trapped on the station saying, no, I have to be involved. And then have other issues where, when Sheridan finds out that it's abandoned and it's booby-trapped, he gets out on his own, comes back with the right amount of oxygen, and then Griegel finds out, the guy I'm here to kill is still on the station somewhere, and then can slip away and go hunting before anyone realizes he's the assassin. Yeah, because I also had issues with that moment where they're arguing like, no, you need me. And just the I don't have time to argue should not have ended with, so come along.
Mm-hmm.
It should have been, or at the very least have Griegel maybe, cause a distraction to slow Sheridan down and then stow away without Sheridan's knowledge. So Sheridan didn't agree to bring him. He's just there. And then continue like there. I don't know. I guess I just think there's better ways to get the two of them together and get that information slowly doled out.
Yeah, there are other ways to do that. But this issue does end up with a double dramatic of Garibaldi and G'Kar realizing they're being chased by a utility robot, and Sheridan and Griegel being attached to what they thought was G'Kar's ship, and it explodes while they're docked. So there's a nice closing line. What they say isn't true. In space, you can hear yourself scream if you live. That's a good line. I like that. In the letters column, they're still talking like there'll be more issues. They talk about how one of the previous artists is going to come and have another run. Details to follow soon. So you said that you're going to have some information at the end of this episode about why the series did not continue. So I'm curious about that. But in the meantime, shall we do number 10?
Yes, let's.
Okay, so number 10 has a cover by Rebecca Guay and Rick Bryant. Same team is on the inside. And it has Garibaldi and G'Kar run/float/swimming down the tube of Babylon 5 while the giant circular death-dealing cleaner robot is pursuing them. Garibaldi is missing a shoe, which ties into the storyline on the inside. I think it's a fun detail to have included. It says deadly refuge because they thought they were safe and they're not. But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If no one ever goes into the core tube of Babylon 5, or if it's one of those parts of the station that is very rarely accessed because, it's the core tube, there's nothing up there. Why have such an aggressively deadly cleaning robot to go down its length?
Yeah, to put them in danger, why is it even the full diameter? Why is it not a series of smaller ones that just patrol and clean the dirt as they find it?
Yeah, go and target thing. Yeah, it's a whole thing.
Yeah. This, you don't need one giant axis filling cleaning machine. You need 80 Roombas.
Right. 80 Roombas.
Just running.
I think I did the subtitle of the first part. The first part was titled Duet for Human and Narn in C#. And this is called Coda for Human and Narn in B flat. So G'Kar and Garibaldi, they barely avoid the lethal, deadly maintenance robot as G'Kar explains to Garibaldi what's going on. Griegel may have claimed to be Jakar's closest family member to Sheridan, but Jakar believes that Griegel is here to assassinate him at all costs. Because you see, Jakar committed a grave insult at one point by refusing to bond the clans together through the act of mating Griegel's wife. Yes, Griegel is trying to kill Jakar for not sleeping with his wife. Because Narns, right? And they're another culture, and they're weird. Meanwhile, Sheridan and Griegel are not getting along, and at one point, Griegel acts like he's going to not let Sheridan back into the ship, because Sheridan goes out to fix something, and he tries to get back in, and Griegel's like, I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that. And anyways, they only make it back to the station together because Sheridan is not a murderer, and Griegel can't operate the ship without him. Everybody gets back. They all come together. The Garibaldi and Jakar escape from the tube, and everyone knows where Jakar is because somehow, some way, Garibaldi is marking Jakar's name in big puff paint letters on the outside of the tube so you can see it from the surface. Anyways, Garibaldi uses a mirror, an actual mirror, to deflect the laser when Griegel tries to kill Jakar, and then tells the security officer to launch a star web at Griegel. So they actually do the whole laser mirror star web thing in real life. They can find Griegel, and everything sort of wraps.
Yeah. So it took Garibaldi a long time to figure out that they were still on the station. And yet somehow there's some sort of controls that he can use to label Jakar on the outside. Like, if there was control panels he could use to light up Jakar's name with the arrow pointing to where they can pick him up, then wouldn't they be in a language he would recognize and an interface that he would know? We would have known that they were on Babylon 5 long before the end of issue 9? Because he keeps saying he's never seen anything like this place. And it took him a little too long to figure it out based on then what happens in the next issue.
Yeah. Yeah, that doesn't really connect. And it's also, they're trying to get down the length of the tube, but it takes a lot of lateral movement to paint letters that big. So somehow Garibaldi was going, from their perspective, back and forth, left and right a whole bunch to make these letters show up whenever they're actually trying to get down the length of the tube. So that's weird.
Yeah, that's what I was assuming. He was turning on lights or something to set it up with the control panels, because without it, how could Jakar not notice that, yes, he's trying to spell letters out and then jumping and then, yeah.
There's an attempt at comedy. I say it's an attempt at comedy because I'm not entirely sure it lands. Every time, so at one point, the cleaning tentacle grabs Garibaldi's foot and it pulls his boot off. And evidently the robot pauses a moment to munch on the boot. So they're able to get ahead of it a little bit. And so they keep throwing articles of clothing back at the robot to make it sit and munch for a second while they get farther down. And they do laser mirror star web to decide who's going to throw out the next, article of clothing. And at one point, both gentlemen are down to their boxers. And that's fine, I guess. It's just, like I said, it's a romp. It feels completely out of place. It literally bothered me, though. I felt like it was, objectification is not the word, fetishization is not the word, but this idea where something is different, and so you're just going to make it so different because it's different. And hey, look, let's talk about how different it is as far as cultures go. And I feel like the stuff with the Narns was actually like insulting. I don't know if I'm taking it too far, but it feels weird.
It does feel weird. I'm with you on the clothing bit not landing, getting them down to their boxers, because that, to me, is a juvenile style of humor, and Babylon 5 has never gone juvenile anything.
Right.
So I think that's why it's out of place. You can do humor in something serious. X-Files is a prime example of doing it well. But X-Files was a serious show that didn't go juvenile with the humor.
And Ivanova is funny on the show.
Yes.
There's humor on the show, but it's not this.
Yeah. And for me, one thing I will give Gerald credit for was giving some hint that the Narns have different attitudes towards the sexual relationships. Early on when Garibaldi says, when he wants to die, he wants to do it in his 90s, in bed with a beautiful woman, shot by a jealous husband. And G'Kar's response is, why would he be upset? You'd be doing the woman a favor. So that gives a hint that the Narns regard it differently, which sort of helps support the ending. It still doesn't completely land with me, but I appreciate the fact that Gerald was trying to set up the different attitude.
Right.
With that line that felt like a throwaway on the first read, but I realized was foreshadowing on the second. But to me, I'll give them one buy-in. So they could have had the giant cleaning robot, or the Inidonka getting on the ship with Sheridan, or something. But this just needs too many things that are there because it is required by the plot more so than because it makes sense for the characters to make these choices.
Mm-hmm.
It's too many times where the characters feel twisted to fit the plot rather than the plot following because of who the characters are.
Right. And, we finally find out that the Inidarka, as a valued member of the clan, is actually the person who is all the different ranks of Kinis that Grigol, doesn't explain. He just lists whenever Sheridan's trying to get information. Grigol gives him basically non-information, gets a bunch of proper nouns he doesn't understand. These are all just like different kinds of killings that are done in the clan, but the Inidarka is a killer who's fulfilling an obligation, like the death is owed and the person deserves to be killed or something and knows they deserve to be killed or something like that. I don't know. But in this confrontation or altercation between two members of a culture that is not human, and so in the way the story is told, it's almost that Sheridan should let this happen. G'Kar doesn't want to die, but he also knows that the guy has the right to kill him. What ends up being the clincher is that you didn't file an assassination permit with the administration offices of the station. And it's just like, okay, I guess.
Yeah. I don't even know if an actual assassination permit is a thing. Or
No, it's not a thing. I don't believe for a second that it's a thing.
No, but yeah, you're like, yeah, so this is a case where we're in conflict with the cultures. But again, so Grigol would, he's got the license from the Narn. So he's got a card that says, I have permission to come kill G'Kar. So what it doesn't resolve, we see why Grigol's arrested on the station. They've got him caught up in the Star Web. But why is it over? We've talked about how the Narns have blood oaths that they have to fulfill, even if it takes decades.
So Grigol could easily come back later.
Yeah. Or just wait for G'Kar to leave the station and chase him elsewhere. I don't see why this is a long-term resolution instead of short-term. To me, the resolution is a little pat, and it's more about the joke where, oh no, he's trying to kill him for not sleeping with his wife. Da-da-da, ba-ding-ching. Moving on.
And the story on a mechanics level mostly works fine. There are a couple of weird things that we've mentioned. It just does not feel at all like a Babylon 5 story. And it certainly does not feel like the kind of story that we have expected from this series so far. The comic series, not just Babylon 5 as a show. The comic series has been rather good. And this story, I knew this story was not, and we should clarify this up front. Issues 1 through 8 and issue 11 basically have the sign off from JMS. They're considered canon by in part of the show. And I knew going into the series that 9 and 10 were not. And I just figured, like the novels, they had elements that would contradict the storyline. And for whatever reason, they didn't get signed off on. I have a feeling that any potential conflicts of canon material is the least of the problems with this two-parter.
Yeah, which is honestly really disappointing. I mean, this is David Gerald writing.
I love David Gerald. I respect the hell out of him as a human. This is
this is the guy who gave us Tribbles, right? This is the guy who gave us Believers, where Franklin wanted to do, or went ahead and did a medical procedure on a child without parental permission because of religious differences. Like, this is the worst piece of writing I've ever seen with David Gerald's name on it by a wide margin.
Right. I've followed him on Facebook. I've gotten to know him a bit. We've talked just a couple times. I think the guy is a fantastic person. This is just not a great work.
No, so I don't know what conditions it was. I don't know if he had the prep time he wanted. Again, I don't know if he had maintained familiarity with the show following his contributions in season 1. Because again, even though this is placed between episodes 3 and 4, it didn't really feel like it was that early season 2 status quo. It felt more like a season 1 status quo.
Mm-hmm. Sinclair could have just as easily been Sheridan and everything would have been fine. The other way around, Sheridan could have just as easily been Sinclair.
Yeah.
But yeah, the one thing I'm thinking is he did give us Tribbles, right? Which is quite the romp and quite the comedy episode. And if you watched, say, Balance of Terror and The Trouble with Tribbles back to back, you'd wonder, were they even the same show?
Yeah, I had a friend who asked, if she wanted to give TOS a try, the original Star Trek, what should she watch? And I told her, watch The Trouble with Tribbles and then The City on the Edge of Forever in that order. That will show you the range.
Mm-hmm.
And
so maybe he was going for the Tribble-ish romp, but there's a trouble with this Tribble.
Yeah, but the Trouble with Tribbles has the space to build to the romp. This dives in from the start.
Right.
We didn't have that warm-up. He slides us in Trouble with Tribbles into the romp. Most of the comedic romp stuff happens in the second half. The first half, the only real comedy, is where they're there for the emergency, and he says, yeah, it's our wheat. Wait, what? Yeah, the Quadritriticale. This is the emergency. So the people on the Enterprise do not have the same set of priorities as the guy running the station.
Right. And the disdain that Kirk has for that details officer whose name I forget, Arnie Darkin maybe. But anyways, yeah. I don't know that I have anything else to say about Darvin. That's right. I don't know if I had anything else to say about this without getting into more snarky territory. And generally speaking, I do like to be positive about the things I podcast about. I was unhappy. I was unhappy and disappointed with this issue.
Yeah, I think we can wrap up our discussion of 9 and 10. I will just say that my last comment, while there's far worse media out there, this is the worst thing I've seen with the Babylon 5 brand or the David Gerrold name.
Mm-hmm.
So it may not be as bad as we're saying here, but it is just so far below the expectation we've had.
Right.
It feels that bad. I talk often, usually in the context of movies, about how your expectation will skew your perspective. I mean, when the Lego movie came out, people were talking about it like it was a 10 out of 10. And it's good. I would say it's actually like an 8 out of 10. But because we were walking into that theater expecting the Lego movie to be more like a 5 or 6 out of 10, when it delivered the 8, it felt like a 10.
Right. This
feels like a 2 or 3 out of 10 because we've come to expect 7s, 8s, and up from Babylon 5. And maybe if we step back and view it objectively, if this is our first exposure to Babylon 5, it might be more like a 5 or 6.
I think that's probably fair. In similar fashion, whenever my kids and I went to go see the Avatar: The Last Airbender feature film, we were very disappointed by it. And it's one of the few films I've ever watched that has made me upset that I watched it. I don't generally have that reaction to stuff. I tend to like things. But then someone else last time I said that after having heard my really negative reactions, saw it and was kind of surprised how much they enjoyed it. But they didn't have, the connections to the source material that I had, et cetera, et cetera. So anyways, your expectations can definitely skew what you can get out of a piece of work. And that's almost definitely the case here.
Okay. I haven't seen that movie yet, or the anime, but we do own that movie because my wife is from Vietnam. She's been back once in the last 9 years. She often misses it. So at one point, I went online and found every Hollywood production we could find here that was filmed in Vietnam. So we picked it up on that context. So she's, we've seen Kong Skull Island and stuff like that. We rarely watch The Amazing Race, but we saw 2 recent episodes where they went.
I highly recommend the anime if you like animated, comedic adventure, children's entertainment with depth. Highly recommended. And then, watch the movie if you want to, but
the comments you heard from the third party and the others tell me I am more inclined to watch the movie first, knowing it is a poor representation, because I think if I watch the anime first, it'll be hard to be satisfied by the movie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if I watch the movie, I might say, oh, that was okay. And then I can watch the anime and find it so much better, because that seems to be the universal reaction. Is there don't seem to be a lot of people who are huge fans of the live action movie, but everybody who's seen both greatly, greatly, greatly prefers the anime, regardless of which order they watch them in.
Yep.
So I think if I watch the movie first, I might have a shot at enjoying both instead of just the one.
Well, speaking of enjoying things, let's talk about issue 11.
Ah, yes. So issue 11, The Psi-Corps and You. Cover dated December 1995, released October 5th, 1995. Written by Tim DeHaas, who was the one that scripted 5 through 8 based on Straczynski's premise. Penciled and inked by John Ridgway. Colored by Robbie Bush. Lettered by Tracy Hampton-Munsey. Edited by Laura Hitchcock, with a cover by John Ridgway. Rough synopsis: the Psi-Corps have a public service announcement promoting their good works. In the process, we learn that one of the first telepaths on Earth kept his abilities secret and became head of presidential security. He saved the president's life through a noble and unintentional use of his power, and that helped found the Psi-Corps after the fact and change what the Psi-Corps was. And PSA concludes with a story of the recruitment of a 10-year-old Alfred Bester, and encourages the viewers who suspect that they or their friends are telepaths to sign up for a better life with the Corps. So it's easy to synopsize, and it is worth noting here, this is the first official Babylon 5 media of any kind that gives Bester a first name.
Yes, and I made that connection on our first instance of the character, not even realizing it hadn't been said on screen. And I think it was partly because I had looked him up or something. I forget exactly what. But yeah, so Bester on the show is officially named Alfred Bester here, which is, of course, a nod to a classic science fiction writer.
Yes, Alfred Bester wrote The Demolished Man, which is often regarded as the pinnacle book about telepathy. So naming him Bester was a nod to that, and Tim DeHaas picked up on that and just finished the reference by saying, yeah, his first name is Alfred as well.
Right. And it's the way the story is told, it's a little bit of a reveal that it's Alfred Bester because it's a 10-year-old boy named Alfred. And everything's talking about this 10-year-old boy named Alfred. And then the fact that his last name is Bester is mentioned in one of the last bits of that part of the story. This is essentially an in-universe propaganda PSA something or other for the Psi-Corps. This is like if you were sitting down and watching your TV shows in the afternoon and they were putting up a commercial about, you know, what the Parks and Recreation Department is doing for your local town or something. This is that kind of a thing. It's an in-universe bit about the Psi-Corps and how all the good things it's done and where it came from. And if you too think that you're a telepath, you should go consult them. Although their quiz at the end for when you might go to consult the Psi-Corps is a very interesting set of questions.
Mm-hmm. And even the cover says, special issue brought to you by Psi-Corps with their logo. And there's even a little for distribution on Babylon 5 only.
Only on Babylon 5. Well, I guess it is addressed to the Babylon 5 residents in its language.
Yeah.
So one of my first questions about this is, why isn't Talia the one doing all of the narrating? The person doing the narrating presents herself as the person on Babylon 5 who does the job that we've seen Talia doing. And I was not under the impression that there was a team of telepaths on Babylon 5. I thought she was the one.
She is the one, yes. Well, not the one as in...
like fulfilling prophecy.
Like Zathras, the one. But
yeah.
Yes. Yes, she is the resident commercial telepath. So, yeah, that is a question that might best be tabled. So...
okay, for like a little bit later.
Yeah, at this point we have no explanation for that. So aside from saying, well, maybe because it is a PSA, they had, sort of the mock person. Like at the time of this recording, there's recent ads for a mobile phone company that Ryan Reynolds is involved in, and he brings in Grant Gustin actually playing the part of one of the people who works for the company and makes a bunch of Flash references and how you'll always be my Flash. And then Gustin responds, you'll always be my Hal. Oh, that hurts. Or you'll always be my Barry. Yeah.
Yeah.
which is something, you know what, I'm not going to blame Ryan Reynolds for the problems with the Green Lantern movie.
No.
He might have had the range to play the comic book Hal, but the comic book Hal is not the kind of character that would make you read it, that I would read and say, you know what, this character is like any character that Ryan Reynolds has previously played, because he's not. I picture more as the William Shatner Kirk with a power ring. But again, tangent.
So the idea that they had just had a stand-in for the purpose of the PSA, pretending to be the person on Babylon 5, was the only explanation that occurred to me. It didn't occur to me that there would actually be an in-universe reason that could come to light later. That's interesting. Although that sort of new information is exactly the kind of thing that I come to expect from this comic series. That there are things about the show that the people who are making it know that we don't know because they're talking to JMS and we're the ones who are getting this stuff spoon-fed to us.
Yeah, and JMS also has the final editorial say according to his contract. Well, except it wasn't written to the contract, it was a verbal agreement. So more on that after we finish discussing issue 11.
The presentation of the Psi Corps starts out with exactly the kind of thing that we first heard about, where the presence of the Psi Corps officer or representative, because they're not military, is a commercial one. She's there to help with making sure that things are done with integrity, that negotiations are not being, people aren't being lied to, and that sort of thing. And that's the first stuff we find out about the Psi Corps, and that's the first that's presented here. And then they go into like the history and everything. I thought it was a neat place to start because it's with all of this shadiness that's going on about the Psi Corps, it's kind of easy to forget that ostensibly the reason they're even in the story is, for just, keeping business dealings from being shady.
Yeah, and if you pay careful attention, this might have been part of the propaganda, but it is consistent with some of the things going on Earth. When you look at those business things that she's dealing with, she is protecting the human businessmen from the lying alien businessmen. Oh,
that never even occurred to me. Wow. Yeah, that does fit in with the way the show's been going. Interesting. It's funny because in the Star Trek lore, Starfleet is Earth-based and primarily human. But that aspect is downplayed because obviously it's human actors. So of course it's mostly human. The idea that there would be like racially prejudiced motivations behind that is alleged by outsiders, but never seems to be the case in universe, except for maybe in some expansion media. So here, the idea that Earth really is a bunch of xenophobic, racist people vying for power. Yeah. It's like, it strikes a little bit too close to home with the realism.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, I liked the story of how the Psi Corps got started because we've had hints that they were originally started to protect telepaths. We've had that set on screen before. And so you have this person who saves the life of the president from an assassination attempt because they're able to read minds. And that does not come out until the person's on their deathbed after the save. And so the president elects to give telepaths a safe place. And that safe place eventually becomes a fortress that they start operating out of. And of course, that's not gone into here, but it's just interesting.
Yeah, so we are seeing actually an existing organization designed to monitor the sudden appearance of telepaths becomes the Psi Corps.
Mm-hmm.
Which is designed not just to monitor, but also let's guide, let's train. And that happens by presidential order after recognizing immediate military applications.
Let's guide, let's train, let's empower, let's weaponize.
Mm-hmm. And let's do that. And I think that's, this character is that fictional stand-in because another part of this character's history is that her great-grandfather was that telepath who changed everything.
Okay.
So I think it's kind of the fictionalized. I suspect that's why she's there. It's right because it's a, like you said, it's a fictionalized propaganda piece. I think it's like how when they do biopics of people, the actors that are playing the real people are almost universally more attractive than the real people were.
Yes.
Right. Your only exceptions would be when you're doing a biopic of maybe a Marilyn Monroe, or, for a while there was going to be a biopic of Hedy Lamarr starring Gal Gadot. Those are exceptionally attractive people to begin with. But if you're talking, a more random selection of real people, if you're talking, Beautiful Mind, John Nash and Russell Crowe, or Mrs. Nash, I forget her first name, and Jennifer Connelly, not really the same level.
Right.
The Crown, anyone on screen versus anyone off screen in The Crown, not really the same level. So that's a thing. So yeah, I think it is slightly fictionalized in that sense. And to make that connection, saying, oh yeah, that, this is sort of built into the DNA of me here on Babylon 5 when she's not the one on Babylon 5.
And it's also a little bit weird because this is being produced for the people on Babylon 5. So somebody might come to the office and say, I'm looking for this and this person. They're like, well, they're not here. They don't work here. Talia Winters works here. She can help you. No, I wanted to talk to this person. She's the one. So it could set up an actual, problem. But they didn't ask me when they were making the brochure. So I can't give them that advice. But yeah, this was, building the universe. It was expanding our knowledge of what we've seen on the television show. This is the kind of storytelling I've expected from the comic. And it's not even a story so much as it is, like I said, a brochure with some narrative pieces, but it's just information about Psychor.
It is. And up to this point, we've been able to say, right from the editor's note, this story takes place between episode A and episode B. So everything's been pinned down. But really, this one could have come out at any point from when, I would say, from when Lita Alexander first shows up as the original commercial telepath of Babylon 5 in The Gathering. Could have shown up any time between then and now. Because this is basically just promoting Psychor, and it does not directly reference any events we've seen in the series.
I just flip back to the beginning. Diane Matthews is the woman's name who's narrated this whole thing. She's on the cover with the boy who goes off to the Corps and the the officer who gives his life in the assassination attempt. And Talia Winters is standing there, and grown Alfred Bester is standing there. But I think it's really funny that Talia is standing there on the cover. And just from the positioning of everybody, it's almost like she knows that she's being excluded from this narrative, and she's just like standing in the back with her hands folded. I'm probably reading too much into that. It just kind of feels that way.
Yeah, but as you're saying, Talia Winters in this issue exists only on the cover.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it is Psychor related, but that's it. So that's that piece on the exterior, I guess, is the piece that would say, okay, it's after the Gathering, but Midnight on the Firing Line and beyond. Right? When we've got Talia there, that can work. So
this is something I have to read. This is the how to find out if you're a telepath. Circle yes or no to each of these questions. And if you answered yes to one or more of these questions, you might be a telepath and you should go talk to the Psychor Registration Center. So any one of these, you should go get some help. Here we go. Have you ever heard someone talk, but their lips didn't move? Ooh, okay. Do you hear voices in your head when no one around you is speaking? You might not be telepathic. You might be schizophrenic. Do you finish other people's sentences for them? Is anyone in your family a telepath? Do you often feel different from your friends? And like 90% of teenagers have to go sign up now. Has anyone ever told...
Only 90?
Right? Has anyone ever told you, you just read my mind? So yeah, if a friend starts to cry, do you feel strangely compelled to cry too? Oh, you have empathy? You might be a telepath. Can you read things you can't see by seeing them in someone else's mind? Okay, that was, Have you ever considered joining Psychor? Have you ever considered joining Psychor? If you have thought about being a telepath, guess what? You might be a telepath. And have you ever, this is my favorite, have you ever said something and then noticed that everyone was looking at you strangely? Yes, that's me. So Blaine, I might be a telepath. I should go get checked out.
Yeah, every time I tell a math-related joke to my students.
Right.
Like when a student was complaining it was cold, I told her, well, have you tried standing in the corner? Why, is it warmer? Well, the corner is 90 degrees.
So they might get a lot of false positives with this, but this is definitely aimed toward trying to not ever have a false negative, like trying to get as many people who might show up yes, please show up.
Yeah, the false positive thing, when I read it, I had that same reaction and thought back to a very clear demonstration from one of my education courses where the prof was saying, be very careful of surveys that the teachers fill out to see, does the child, in that case, it was the context of ADD and ADHD, because some of them are poorly made and will give a lot of false positives. So teachers cannot make those diagnoses, even though for a while they were told, oh, you can just use this survey. And to drive that point home, our prof passed around a survey, and by the time we finished answering it, 55% of the class, including myself, were coming out positive for menopause.
Oh.
So, yeah. And yeah, the oldest female student was early 30s. So, yeah. So you have to watch the false positives on the surveys. And in addition to that, there is also another page, which is basically an in-universe ad. Sorry, let me find it again. The future is yours. Make it a bright one. Psycor, the right choice for everyone. Copyright 2259 Psycor, with 2 Psycor agents and a diverse set of children in front of them, with a rocket going to space in the background and the galaxy. So yeah, this looks like it was designed as a print comic to be distributed.
Yeah, because Diane Matthews at the beginning says, when you're done reading this. So this almost feels like this was supposed to be a comic or, literature for children in the universe.
Yeah, this one, it's a physical copy. It's right on the staple. It's facing the page where Lisa is getting the shots to suppress her telepathy so she can continue being a successful lawyer. And the only side effects of these shots is that sometimes she has to rest a little and get tired. At which point I could imagine Ivanova demanding that every single one of these be thrown in the recycling on the station and recalled, because that was nowhere close to her mother's experience.
Well, I really enjoyed this. Getting Bester's backstory. I didn't predict that would turn out to be Bester. Actually, I think I may have done, because they called him Alfred. I was like, oh, that's funny. Yeah,
I think because we knew that, I would have made the connection. I made the connection too. I don't think I would have made the connection if we were sitting there in 1995 doing all of this in release order.
Right. They also do a story that ties into the Midnight on the Firing Line with Sinclair at the Minbari, the final battle, and how, while Sinclair went off and did the stuff with the Minbari, there was a telepath among the pilots helping out keep all the officers calm. So we only ended the Minbari War because a telepath helped. So it was an interesting spin on this major event in recent galactic political history.
Yes. Yeah, they're trying to share the credit. Although, to be fair, Sinclair didn't personally have a lot of credit. He was just,
right.
Okay, I'm going to do the last minute RAM, because the whole idea that it was a calculated attack that ended the war was propaganda in the first place.
Yes. So that in itself is a spin. But yeah.
Yeah, they're taking it one step further to say, and you have us to thank for the fact that he was able to pull it off.
Didn't we find out that people who get the injections to have their telepathic abilities suppressed, that those have really negative side effects that Ivanova's mother did not, that were not good for her?
Yep, this is why I thought when Ivanova hit that page, she'd order every one of these destroyed.
Yeah, so there's a couple pages in here about a woman who is a lawyer, and so she gets the injections to suppress her telepathic abilities so that she can have her successful law practice. But we have found out that those injections are very much explicitly not good for telepaths. Do they just like deaden your personality? Is that what happened? She just became like a non-person?
Over time, yes. So Ivanova talked about how she can see her mother degrading, and so at first she was just herself but tired, and at the end she was a shell who ended up committing suicide because of how horrible the experience was.
Yeah, and it makes sense, because you are literally telling your brain not to do what it's trying to do, and that can be bad for it. But anyways, so yes, we've gone pretty long because of all the diatribes against issues 9 and 10. But issue 11 was a great note to go out on. I'm glad we got that before the series ended. And the letters column talks about how Bill Mumy is working on a story for the comic that should be coming out soon, It says, "We're taking a long time, we know." But then they end the letters page by saying that this is the last issue for now. They will probably be back very soon, perhaps in another format. It'll take a few years before the comic comes back in any form, and then only for a 3-issue miniseries. But Blaine, what do you know about that?
So as I said, when they were doing it, they had a handshake and a verbal agreement that, and part of it was in writing, that JMS had the final editorial say over the content of the issues. And at this point, he'd already been frustrated because not Laura Hitchcock, personally, this was not her policy. It was just a policy she was forced to, or that she had to enforce from her higher-ups. Tie-in media should be aimed at like the 8 to 12 crowd. So they were constantly dumbing down the scripts, and JMS was using his final editorial say to, bring that level back up again.
Which is a really weird policy. I would not have thought that was the case, but I guess novels and comics have different standards on those kinds of things. But it still feels weird to DC to say, oh, we're tying into an adult TV show with a comic book. Let's aim that adult TV show tie-in at children.
Yeah, I think this policy came out in the same time that Rambo and RoboCop got Saturday morning cartoons. It was an odd choice.
And the Toxic Crusaders. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And then Straczynski wrote issue 12 and submitted it. And they dumbed it down. And he didn't know that they had dumbed it down and not boosted it back up until they sent him the pencils to look at with the ink. So it hadn't been fully colored, but I think they were starting to letter it. And they were not his words. And he went back and said, hey, I have final editorial say, what's going on? And the corporate lawyer response was, that clause applies when you are the overseeing editor. In this case, you are the writer. That's a different role. So this is excluded from that contract clause. And we could dumb it down without your saying there's nothing you could do about it. To which he said, oh, yes, it is. I'm pulling your license. And yanked the comics away from them.
Wow.
So, yeah, they were a commercial success. I would say overall, they were an artistic success. But people at DC whose names do not appear anywhere in the printed issues, they did not adhere to the spirit of the agreement, even if they did adhere to the letter. And JMS was not okay with that and basically took it away from them and was starting to shop others. And then because it was commercially successful, when they said, it might be coming back in another form, some people were trying to, make amends and rebuild those bridges, but not enough. And they didn't manage to make that work for a long time. So when it does come back for a 3-issue miniseries in Valen's name, which we will cover when the time comes, that came back under new management.
Mm-hmm.
And with much more explicit contracts.
And direct writing from JMS, I believe.
Yes. So.
Alrighty. Well, I am very glad that we took this trip through the comics. It's kind of cool because, as you said before, this was the one branch of the franchise that you had not, well, the Time Media as a whole is a branch of the franchise you had not gone down before, and you had some pleasant surprises along the way. So that makes me happy.
Yes, I'm glad you suggested that as a way to fill the gaps, because it has been overall enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As we said, being satisfied with 9 out of 11 issues is actually a pretty good track record for any series.
Yeah.
And even the 2 that we weren't quite satisfied with, I think it was just, again, not lining up with our expectations, so they're not as bad as they seem now. And perhaps if we come back and reread them in a couple years with different expectations, it might be better. My favorite comic character is Daredevil, and I had 2 very different experiences reading the 6 issues by Bob Gale, because the first time I read them, I didn't see why people were not happy with it, but those issues showed up in the mail because I mail ordered the back issues, and I read them partway or between reading Essential Volumes 2 and 3, and tonally it fit there. When I went through the reread of the whole series from start to finish when I had it, and read it when they were published, it was between Bendis' 4-issue fill-in arc Wake Up, and then Bob Gale's series came in, and then Bendis was given the title completely. And boy, did it not fit the tone between Bendis' first two arcs.
Hmm.
So I think that might be a similar thing here, where if we were to approach those issues, either out of the context or just as our first exposure to Babylon 5 ever, I suspect we would have been happier with them than we are now. Maybe not 100% happy, but not as, where the hell did this come from?
Which is kind of how it feels right now.
Yeah. All right. So, should we give our last best hopes before?
Oh, dear. Last best hope is to never read issues 9 10 again. I don't know that I can pull one out for this, because the character story is the one I really didn't like, and the story I did like is not really a character piece. So I'm not entirely sure that I have a last best hope.
Yeah, see, well, for me, spoilers, there's a reason I decided to ask this after we'd covered all three and not stop for it after 9 and 10. For me, I think it would be, even though there's a spin on it, finding out that piece about the formation of the Psi Corps, where it really was, here's the military application that benefited us. This is why we're going to invest in the training. So knowing that that's a piece of the original formation, right? Sometimes the DNA of that carries through to today when you're forming organizations like this.
Mm-hmm.
As a teacher, I see some of it in the structure of education system, which was originally founded to try to prevent juvenile delinquency from the middle children. In the days of large families, the oldest boys would be trained to take over the family business. The younger boys would be cared for by the sisters who were trained to be mommies, and those middle boys were getting into delinquency. So the idea was stick them in school and educate them, and the main thing was keeping them busy was the point. More so, if they happen to learn to read and write and do math along the way, that's great. But that's why they had the multi-grade schoolhouses, because they didn't so much have grades.
Right.
And unfortunately, we could see some of that. It has changed a lot, the idealism, especially since, teachers are the people who are successful in schools. So that's not an attitude that's as common these days, but some of the internal structure could still be revamped to overcome that. Similar thing, a lot of the U.S. police forces that have been making the news for the wrong reasons, you dig through their history, and they were first formed pre-Civil War to capture escaped slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a little too much of that still in the DNA of the organization.
Yeah.
So seeing here where the Psi Corps started as a telepath monitoring organization that then became a training organization when the military aspects became crystal clear, and how you can have people who were loyal to the government in that. I think that's an important piece, is the way that was used. Assuming they're even telling us the true story here, because this person's great-granddaughter doesn't exist as far as we know. To me, that just was an interesting piece about, what went into the formation of the Psi Corps. Yeah. So that's what I'm going to pull out, is that moment.
I'm going to take it as it being accurate information insofar as a sterilized presentation of the information would go. I don't think we're getting factually false stuff. We might just be getting, interpreted stuff. But I feel like if they're going to, if they're going to choose to give new information about the Psi Corps, then giving new information that is false will be disingenuous from a storytelling perspective. We don't have a whole lot of unreliable narrators in Babylon 5. So yeah, that's good. I still don't know that I have one.
Okay. Well, shall we just move on to giving form to the dream then?
Yeah.
All right. So pieces of these that are coming back later. I noticed nothing in issues 9 and 10.
Really?
Really?
Oh, man. I'm not surprised.
No, yeah, because I think we've already seen the shuttles that ride the tube on the Axis. Yes, we saw them in the season 1 finale. So, yeah, I can't think of anything here that wasn't previously established. Issue 11. Yes, we've established Bester's first name. That piece is something that's going to come back. A little bit. It's not a huge piece, but again, just the general attitude of the Psi Corps, and the fact that when the Psi Corps put this together, for some reason they chose not to use the real Talia and used this person we've never met before who claims heritage back to the beginning. That it's like some of the other elements. I don't know how much the writers knew or if that just happened to fit. But it does fit well with what's coming.
Alrighty. Interesting. That is extremely cryptic in ways I'm not entirely sure how it would work out, but that's okay. We have a 4.5 year journey, 3.3 year journey ahead of us. So I can find all those things out. So speaking of episodes, I'm excited to dive back into the show next month.
Yes, when we come back, we are coming back with a run of 8 uninterrupted weeks, with the last 4 episodes of Season 2 and the first 4 episodes of Season 3, because season-ending cliffhangers only last a week on the P10 network.
Yeah. We've talked about that before. It bothers me every time, though.
And it's going to come up again, and again, and again.
Every season. All right, so that's going to be Divided Loyalties, which aired October 11th, I believe. So we'll be back October 11th to talk about that.
Yes, and yeah, so we should note that we're going to be shifting dates halfway through this run of 8 episodes because the series did as well.
Shifting what day of the week we're released on.
Yes, so when they'd have a week to air it, and the first day that they had to pick from was a Wednesday up to this point. Starting in Season 3, the syndicated networks could start it on a Monday. So that's why we've got dates. There's actually a 5-day gap between the Season 2 finale and the Season 3 premiere.
Which, just real quick, that may be an aspect of things that no one knows, because I certainly did not know it at one point. I first learned it was like really surprised. But when you look at air dates for shows, you are often not seeing the date that it actually aired. You are seeing the date that the networks or local affiliates or whatever were allowed to air it. So it may have aired at some point after that later in the week. So just be aware that air dates that you see in like Wikipedia records and everything else are not necessarily the actual dates that everybody would have seen it.
Yeah, and that is particularly true for the shows that were first released in syndication.
Yes.
If it was a major network show, it tends to be consistent.
Yeah, that's an aspect of the syndication monster, yeah.
Yeah, so that applies to Babylon 5, to Star Trek The Next Generation, to Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and Earth Final Conflict, Andromeda, the other Roddenberry spin-offs. Those were all sold to syndication. So they had a 1-week window in which to air it, and we're listing the first one. And sometimes those windows didn't quite line up in Canada, so that last run of Deep Space Nine, where there was the 10 episodes that built to the series finale, in Canada, we actually had it 1 day earlier than the US window. So we had a rerun in the middle of that nobody else had because they didn't want Canadian market spoiling the finale. So instead, we had to wait 6 days for the rest. But all right, after those 8 weeks, we will be doing our next feedback episode, and that feedback would be delightful. So you can send that to our email, Babylon5 30 years later @gmail.com.
You can leave comments at either of the websites for the show, the first of which is johnreadscomics.com.
You can also leave comments at bureau42.com. Between those two websites, you will find every podcast John and I are involved in.
And you can leave reviews on your podcatcher of choice. We check Apple Podcasts as a matter of course. If you would like us to read your review and you leave it somewhere else, just let us know.
And finally, you can leave comments on our YouTube channel, and they will be approved in fairly short order if they are appropriate, and we can go from there.
All right. So, Divided Loyalties back in the show next month. Excited.
Yeah. So thank you for listening.
And good eating to you.